that I got a part in the Beatles film, but it was very secret and I wasn't to tell anyone.
I was very, very suspicious about what they were up to.
George was very sweet and I thought he was quite shy, like me. I think that's why we got on initially.
But when I saw them play, I mean, I was overwhelmed by their gift. They were very generous to everybody. I mean, they took time to come and talk to everybody.
Then George said to me, "How's the boyfriend?" I said, "I don't have one." And he said, "Good, let's go out tonight."
He was clearly an innovator. George, to me, was taking certain elements and creating something unique.
Obviously you've known each other
How
forever.
did I get to meet him?
No, but how did you meet? No, how did you decide?
We shared the same wife.
Few tales in rock history capture the intersection of music, love, and male ego quite like the fabled guitar duel between George Harrison and Eric Clapton.
The two of you go back a really long way.
A long way, back to the early 60s, yeah. In fact, I was with the Yardbirds when I first met George, and we were on the Beatles Christmas show. And we hit it off, and I love him very much. He's a great guy.
It is a story that has been embroidered over time, taking on a near mythical quality, the image of two of the greatest guitarists of their era settling their romantic dispute not with fists, but with Fender and Gibson. Yet, as with many such stories, the reality is both more nuanced and, in many ways, more poignant.
It must be hard to keep up friendships in this business, though. I mean, you move a lot, you work all over the place.
Well, as time goes by, I mean, it's a bit like when you're at war, you stick together, and it's like the old guys now, we do stick together because of all the competition, and I find that I have more in common with people that have survived the 60s and the 70s. We've got the same sort of attitude,
At the centre of it all was Pattie Boyd. A model, muse and eventual memoirist, Boyd was not just a muse in the passive sense, but a figure whose presence ignited some of the greatest love songs ever written. George Harrison's Something was, according to Frank Sinatra, one of the best love songs I believe to be written in the past 50 or 100 years. Yet Harrison was not the only one inspired by Boyd's enigmatic charm. Eric Clapton, despite his close friendship with Harrison, had fallen deeply in love with her. His feelings were not subtle. Indeed, they burned with a feverish intensity, most famously manifesting in the 1970 masterpiece Layla. Before that, however, Clapton wrote Boyd a letter, pleading for her love. For nothing more than the pleasures past, I would sacrifice my family, my God, and my own existence. Why do you hesitate? Am I a poor lover? Am I ugly? Am I too weak, too strong? Do you know why? If you want me, take me, I am yours. If you don't want me, please break the spell that binds me. Boyd later recalled how she felt upon reading the letter. I was overwhelmed. It was so intense, so passionate, and yet I was still married to George. I didn't know what to do, but Eric's devotion was undeniable.
I showed the letter to George and I said, "Oh, George, look at this weird one I've got from a fan." And he sort of thought, "Oh yeah," dismissed it. Later on, the phone rang and it was Eric. He said, "Did you get my letter?" I thought, "No. I mean, yes, I got a letter, but I didn't know it was from you. I thought it's from a fan, So he said, "No, it's from me." And I said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah."
Clapton's feelings for Boyd were no secret among his inner circle. His friend and fellow musician Bobby Whitlock recalled how tormented Clapton was. He was obsessed. Every time we sat down to write or play, he'd bring her up. He was in agony over her.
I was obsessed with this woman. So that's why I said, I don't know if I loved her. Because as a practicing drunk, which I was then, I just wanted something very badly.
So I think George was recording an awful lot and not really paying me much attention. And then so Eric came sneaking in.
Boyd resisted for years, but it was only with the arrival of Layla, a song drenched in yearning and passion, that she finally succumbed to Clapton's pursuit. The realization that I had inspired such passion and creativity, the song got the better of me. I could resist no longer, Boyd later admitted.
There was a beautiful painting that Eric gave me that he was given from the owner of a house in the south of France where he and his band were recording. And he loved this particular painting, and Eric decided to call it Layla. This is all based on a book called Layla and Majnun, and it's a ancient Persian love story. And he related to being Majnun and me Layla.
In 1974, Harrison finally discovered the full extent of Clapton's affections for his wife. By this point, his marriage to Boyd had been deteriorating, a casualty of infidelity and spiritual divergence. What happened next, as told by actor John Hurt, took on the qualities of a scene from a film, a duel not with swords or pistols, but with guitars. The moment reportedly took place at Harrison's Oxfordshire estate, Friar Park. Clapton arrived, and rather than an explosion of rage, the two men communicated in the way they knew best, through music. Hurt, watching the exchange, later recounted it in his memoir as a guitar duel, an interpretation that has since fueled decades of myth-making. Boyd, however, later downplayed the idea of a direct contest. John Hurt, being an actor and seeing everything as theatre, wrote about it in his memoir, she said, but in reality, it was a lot less dramatic. What actually happened, she suggested, was more akin to a jam session, albeit one charged with unspoken emotion. They were boy men, immature emotionally, Boyd reflected. Musicians communicate through their instrument of choice, and they understand each other through music. Any annoyance, anger, and irritation from George only really came out when he was playing guitar with Eric. Despite Boyd's insistence that the so-called duel was exaggerated, others present recall a certain tension in the air. Music producer Glyn Johns, who worked closely with both musicians, later said, "It was clear George wasn't thrilled about Eric being around, but the way they dealt with it was very British, very reserved, very polite, but unmistakably icy." Clapton himself recalled the encounter in an interview years later. "It was awkward, no doubt about it. George knew what was going on, I knew what was going on, and Pattie knew what was going on, but we didn't have a fight, not in the way people think. We played. That was how we spoke to each other." There was no clear winner in this so-called duel. Harrison and Boyd's marriage did not last much longer, and by 1977, their divorce was finalized. In 1979, Boyd married Clapton, a union that lasted a decade, but, like her marriage to Harrison, ended in heartbreak. Harrison and Clapton, remarkably, remained friends. Theirs was a bond that transcended personal conflicts, forged in mutual respect, and, perhaps, an understanding that Boyd had never truly belonged to either of them in the way they might have hoped. "We were mates," Clapton said simply. "That was always bigger than anything else." For all the romanticism of the story, the so-called duel was less a battle for Boyd's love, and more an instance of two men wrestling with emotions they struggled to articulate in any other way. It was not a final confrontation, but a moment of catharsis, played out on fretboards rather than fists. "It was never really a fight," Boyd mused in later years. "It was just music."